she stopped eating on a Tuesday, and by Friday, nobody could explain it. The veterinary team had been called in by Wednesday. Blood work, physical examination, every standard check they had in their toolkit, and every result came back the same way. Clean. Normal. Nothing wrong that anyone could measure or name. The headkeeper stood outside Martha's enclosure on Friday afternoon and watched her stand at the far wall with her back to the yard and felt the particular helplessness that comes with knowing something is deeply wrong and having no category to put it in. Martha was not sick. Martha was grieving. And the thing she was grieving was still alive, somewhere out there in the world, completely unaware of what his absence was doing to her. Martha had lived at the wildlife park for 30 years. She had arrived as a 1-year-old calf, small enough that 2 people could carry her between them when she needed to be moved. Frightened in the specific way that animals are frightened when they have already learned that the world can take everything from you without warning. Poachers had killed her mother. The people who found her afterward did not know how long she had been alone before they got there. But the answer, whatever it was, had left a mark on her that every keeper who worked with her in those early months could see clearly and could do almost nothing about. She tolerated people. That was the most that could be said for the first year. She ate when she had to. She allowed herself to be examined, but she kept a careful, consistent distance between herself and every human being in that park, a distance that communicated, without any ambiguity, that she had already learned what the world was capable of, and she was not going to let herself forget it. 30 years later, the staff who had watched her grow into the warm and complicated and thoroughly opinionated elephant she had become sometimes forgot that version of her had ever existed. They had Daniel to thank for that, and now Daniel was gone, and Martha had stopped eating, and the keeper standing outside her enclosure on Friday afternoon picked up her phone and made a call she had been dreading for 3 days. Daniel answered on the second ring. He had come to the park as a volunteer at 23, carrying more enthusiasm than experience, which the senior keeper had seen in dozens of volunteers before him and which she had learned to treat with cautious optimism. What she had not seen before, or not in quite the same form, was the quality that distinguished Daniel from everyone else who had ever tried to reach Martha and failed. He was patient in a way that did not feel like strategy. It felt like his natural state. Other volunteers and staff had tried various approaches with Martha over her first months at the park. Enrichment activities, gentle persistence, different food combinations, everything reasonable that anyone could think of. Martha had absorbed all of it with the same polite indifference and retreated back to her corner of the enclosure as soon as the interaction ended. Daniel read everything he could find before his first shift with her. He spoke to wildlife experts, studied behavioral research, and arrived at her enclosure on his first morning and did something that nobody else had thought to try. He sat down and did not ask anything of her at all. He found a log at a distance that was visible but not crowding, and he sat on it, and he talked. Not to her exactly. Not in the way you talk to someone you expect to respond. He talked the way people talk when they are alone and thinking out loud, describing his morning, commenting on the weather, saying whatever came into his head, and occasionally laughing at his own observations. He did not look at her directly. He did not move toward her. He simply existed in her space without placing any demand on it. From across the yard, the senior keeper watched him for about 10 minutes and then walked away, shaking her head. She had a zoo to run. She did not have time to observe a young volunteer performing what appeared to be a one-man show for an audience of one extremely uninterested elephant. What she missed, because she had already turned away, was the moment Martha's ears moved. It was small. It lasted less than a second. Daniel, who had been watching her from the edge of his vision the entire time without appearing to, saw it when he laughed at something he had said, and he felt something shift quietly in his chest. He kept talking. He did not change his tone or his posture or the casual direction of his gaze. But inside, he was paying very close attention. He came back the next day, and the day after that, always after his main duties were finished, always for the same unhurried stretch of time, always with the same quality of presence that asked nothing and offered everything. Some days, Martha gave him nothing back. Some days her ears shifted when he laughed. Once, in the third week, he arrived to find her already standing closer to the center of the enclosure than she usually stood, and he sat down on his log and kept his expression completely neutral while internally registering that this was the most significant thing that had happened since he started. He told nobody. He understood that announcing a fragile thing too early was one of the most reliable ways to break it. He added bathing to their routine, making it slow and conversational, following her lead on what she was comfortable with and backing off without comment when she signaled otherwise. The rest of the staff began noticing things they could not quite explain. Martha was eating more consistently. She was spending less time at the back of her enclosure. She had started watching the gate in the late afternoon at around the time Daniel usually finished his other duties, which was either coincidence or was not, and most of the staff had begun to have a quiet opinion about which one it was. Then one evening, about 3 months in, Daniel arrived after a longer day than usual and found her standing near the entrance to her enclosure. Not lying down, not facing the wall, standing, facing the gate, in a way that suggested she had been there for a while. He sat down. He started talking. He was about 5 minutes into a story about something that had happened in the bird enclosure that morning when Martha walked over to him. Slowly, and with the careful deliberateness of an animal that has made a decision, and wrapped her trunk around his arm. She held on. The keeper, who saw it from the far end of the yard, said later that Daniel sat perfectly still for a long time. He did not move. He did not speak. He just sat there with her trunk around his arm and an expression on his face that she could not describe precisely, but that she had never forgotten in the 30 years since. That was the beginning of everything. Martha grew up alongside Daniel and became the animal that everyone pointed to when they wanted to explain why this place mattered. She was warm and playful and had developed a sophisticated system of using her trunk to spray water on specific keepers at specific moments that suggested a level of comedic intentionality that nobody could definitively prove, but that everyone privately believed. She was a stabilizing presence for new elephants brought to the park. She was the first animal visitors asked about and the last one the staff checked on before locking up for the night, but she never bonded with anyone the way she bonded with Daniel. When he decided to leave, he was 53 years old and had spent 30 years building something he had not originally planned to build in a place he had originally intended to stay for only a few months. He had consulting work waiting for him, conservation projects in other parts of the world, plans he had deferred and deferred and deferred because there had always been another reason to stay one more season. He told himself he was ready. He told himself he had given Martha everything she needed to carry on without him, and that his assistants were capable and caring, and that she would adjust. He tried to do it gradually, reducing his visits over the final weeks, spending less time in her enclosure, letting the handover happen slowly so she could get used to the change in rhythm before the change became permanent. He watched from a distance and told himself what he was seeing looked like adjustment. On his last day, he went in to say goodbye. She was happy. She played and rumbled and splashed water and was entirely, heartbreakingly herself. And Daniel spent an hour with her and tried several times to say the thing he needed to say. And she paid no attention to his words because she was too busy being glad he was there. When he finally stood up and turned toward the gate, Martha put her trunk around him and held on. She did not pull or panic. She simply held, with a calm and total certainty that communicated she had understood exactly what was happening and had decided that her opinion on the matter had not been adequately considered. The staff watching from outside the enclosure went quiet. Daniel stood there, held in place by 30 years of history and 400 kilograms of elephant who loved him, and eventually he stopped trying to leave. He stayed the rest of that day. He fed her himself. He gave her a bath and talked through the whole thing the way he always had. And she stood close and listened with her ears slightly forward. And it felt like she was storing something, carefully and deliberately, against an absence she could already sense approaching. He did leave. Eventually. In the early evening, after she had eaten and settled, he slipped out while she was distracted, and he drove home without looking back because he was not sure he could manage it if he did. Within 2 weeks, the morning reports from the park all said the same thing. Martha was not eating. Martha had been found standing at the back of her enclosure with her face to the wall for hours at a time. 2 of the younger keepers had gone in one morning to find her lying on her side in a way she almost never rested, in the middle of the enclosure rather than her usual spot near the far fence. And they had stood there looking at her and then looked at each other and felt, with a clarity that needed no discussion, that what they were witnessing was not a physical problem. She was not sick. She was waiting for someone who was not coming back, and she was beginning to understand that the senior keeper called the manager. The manager called Daniel. He arrived 2 days later, in the early afternoon, and walked into the enclosure the way he had always walked into it, without announcing himself, without theater, just a man moving into a familiar space in a familiar way. Martha was lying on her side near the center of the enclosure. She looked smaller than he remembered, which was not possible but was the only way he could think to describe it. He crouched down close to her level and said her name. Her ears moved. He said it again and added something quietly about the trouble she was causing everyone, and Martha heard the particular texture of his voice that she had been cataloging for 3 decades. And she got to her feet. Slowly, with the careful effort of an animal that had been conserving its strength. She walked to him and put her trunk against his chest and stood there. Nobody outside the enclosure said anything. There was not much to say. She began eating that afternoon. Not all at once, not everything, but enough. Within a few days, she was recognizably herself again, moving through her days with the settled ease of an animal who knows exactly where she is and exactly who she can count on. Daniel did not leave again. The park offered him a management position that kept him nearby, with a schedule flexible enough to accommodate the consulting work he had spent years preparing to do, and he accepted it without much deliberation. Whatever version of his future had existed before Martha wrapped her trunk around his arm and held on had been replaced. A long time ago. By this one. Martha eventually had a calf of her own. On the day the calf was old enough to be introduced to the wider park, Martha walked her baby directly to Daniel's side of the enclosure and waited there until he came over. The staff who watched it happen talked about it for weeks afterward, trying to agree on what exactly she had been communicating. Whether she was showing off, whether she was making an introduction, whether she was doing something that did not have a clean human word for it, something that was simply about wanting the most important thing in her present life, to know the most important person from her past. Whatever it was unmistakably intentional, and everyone who saw it understood, without needing it explained. that Martha had never forgotten what it felt like to be lost and alone and waiting for someone to sit down beside her and stay. She was not going to let her calf forget it either. Martha's story is not just moving. It is backed by decades of science that most people never hear about. Elephants possess the largest brains of any land animal on Earth, weighing around 5 kilograms, roughly 3.5 times heavier than a human brain. According to research published in the journal Animals in February 2023, African elephants can recognize separated family members purely by scent after being apart for up to 12 years. A 2024 reviews published in the journal Learning and Behavior confirmed that wild African elephants use name-like calls specific to individual receivers, suggesting they remember and identify one another across long stretches of time and distance. The science of elephant grief is equally striking. Research published by wildlife neuroscientist Gay Bradshaw, drawing on decades of field data, documented that orphaned elephants who witnessed their mothers being killed display symptoms consistent with post-traumatic stress disorder, including refusing to eat, social withdrawal, and repeated crying. These are not metaphors. These are clinically observed behaviors in animals whose brain structures for processing emotion and memory are remarkably similar to our own. A 2025 study from the Humboldt University of Berlin found that Asian elephants have roughly 20% more gray matter in their cerebral cortex than their African relatives, the region of the brain linked directly to memory, decision-making, and emotional processing. What Martha felt when Daniel left was not instinct. It was memory. It was loss. And it was real. If this story stayed with you, please leave a like and subscribe. It helps us keep telling the stories that matter.